The only phrase I can think of to use to describe our current situation right now is up shit's creek without a paddle. Things have gone from bad to far, far worse. At least since last night. And to tell you the truth, everyone now is scared out of their damn minds. Well, almost everyone. But I'll get on to that in a minute. Before I say anything, let me say thank you to those who commented on last night's post. Despite everything that has happened today, we managed to make some progress, and I can't help but to think it was thanks to all of you giving us some direction. Let me quickly answer a few things that you've brought up. First and foremost, as soon as I opened the laptop and saw the comment, I went and pulled off one of the maps from the ship's wall, looking to see if there was indeed any sort of chapel or religious gathering area for us to haul up in. Unfortunately, the Queen Elizabeth seems to have never had one built aboard her, so that idea is out. Secondly, the reason why we set up base camp in the lounge is because it was the first place we reached when we came aboard. It's the place we know best. After yesterday though, and especially with our current predicament, I'm beginning to think moving to one or two joining cabins might be a better idea. Not as much room for anyone or anything to creep up on us. That being said, let me tell you what happened today. We were roused by the captain just after 10 in the morning. "Come on, Nate," he said, softly shaking me on my shoulder. "We've got work to do. Come on." Then he moved away to wake the others. For another minute I simply lay there, staring up at the ornate ceiling high above our heads. The horrible mental images of the shadowy figures had followed me into my nightmares, and I'd dreamed of running down a dark and seamless endless hallway. The figures always just a step behind me. I shivered slightly as I remembered the voice welcoming me, welcoming all of us aboard. I attempted to force the image out of my head as I pulled myself from the sleeping bag and to my feet. Once everyone was awake, we all quickly had breakfast before I broke out the computer to see what people had said. I quickly scrolled down to the comments, the ones that I'd seen that were there just as the others came over. As much as I wanted to tell the others about what I had seen yesterday, a small part of me whispered that none of them would believe me, especially after what Andrew, Spencer and Will said they saw happen to me. If anything similar happens to me or anyone else, I'll tell them then, but until, I'll keep it to myself. Everyone gathered around to read what you'd all suggested. I could tell to them it was like a lighthouse beacon, helping guide them to safety. I couldn't help but feel a small pang of disappointment flow through me as they again dismissed the ghost ship comments, even though I had known it was coming. Apart from potentially the captain and me, nobody else had seen anything out of the ordinary. I shot glances when he leaned in to read the screen, but any trace of fear I'd seen last night had been wiped away, replaced with his usual calm, calculating expressions. "Well, at least people seem to agree with my idea to find the case," he said finally, standing back up and seeming somewhat pleased. Wyatt leaned in and pointed to another comment. Coppin? Kip, what about this person's suggestion to move from the lounge to some of the cabins to sleep? It'd be a hell of a lot more comfortable than another night on the floor. The captain rubbed his beard, thinking, they might have a point. I wasn't able to get much sleep last night. We'll move our stuff into some of the first-class cabins. Just as we did yesterday, we paired off into two teams. Captain, Andrew and Spencer would head off to the crew quarters to try to find the keys, while myself, Wyatt, Will and Vinny would try to find any food that we could add to our slowly dwindling supplies. I very much didn't want us to split up again, not after both what you all had said and what I had experienced, but try as I might to say it to the captain, he remained steadfast. We need to cover as much ground as possible now, he said after we had dumped our stuff into some adjoining cabins near the lounge. And with that he turned and hustled the other two in his group away. I watched them go, saying a silent prayer for them to be safe before turning to the others. Well, which way do you want to go? Vinny asked, gesturing to the many hallways that branched away from us. I looked down and studied the map of the ship for a moment. My eyes drifted past the maze of rooms and lounging areas before sitting on a large area near the stern of the ship. How about we start here at what looks to be a restaurant called the Veranda Grill? The three of us men craned to look at the map. Sure, why not? Wyatt said, while shrugging his shoulders. With our destination set, we turned and began to head off. Passing through the lounge, we found ourselves in more hallways that seemed to stretch on forever. Man, they had a lot of cabins just for first class alone, Vinny said as we passed a small sitting area looking out into the starboard side of the ship. Then he lowered his voice slightly. Hey, did you have any kind of weird stuff happen to you yesterday? The question caused me to stop dead in my tracks. What do you mean, weird? I asked. Everyone stopped now. Wyatt let out a soft groan. Oh, come on, Vin. Nothing weird happened yesterday. The captain said so. What? I could tell he wasn't being completely honest. Will's brow frowned. What are you guys talking about? He took a step closer towards Vinny. Did something happen to you guys in the engine room? Wyatt let out another protest, but Vinny seemed to ignore him. I don't know, man. All I know is we were down there working like crazy to get the boilers up and running. When I looked over at the captain, he stopped in the middle of giving us directions. I had no idea what to do next. I saw the big man shiver slightly before continuing. He had the creepiest expression on his face. It was like he'd been hypnotized or something. The lights were on, but nobody was home. Then he just snapped out of it. He looked absolutely terrified for half a second, then seemed to remember what was happening and kept going. Wyatt got in. That's 'cause he didn't get much sleep last night. He literally told us that when you asked him what was up. I swear to God, Vinny, you're making a mountain out of a molehill with this dude. Vinny shot a slightly irritated stare at him before turning back to Will and me. I just gotta know, did any of you have anything weird or unusual happen yesterday?" I exchanged a glance with Will. His expression was that of a perfect poker face, but the look in his eyes betrayed what raced behind him. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I debated whether to come clean about my experience, but Will spoke up before I did. "No, nothing like that. Nothing besides accidentally tripping over an overturned chair." I felt a wave of surprise shoot through me. The entire time I'd known Will, I'd never known him to deliberately lie. He was someone who always told the truth, even if it ended up bad for him. Where the hell did this side of him come from? "There, see? All is well. All as well as it can be," Wyatt said triumphantly. "Happy now, Finn?" I saw him study our faces for another moment before shrugging. "Alright, I guess it really was nothing." And with that, he turned and began walking down the hall again. I speared another glance at Will, but he simply shrugged at me and turned to follow them. I stared after him for a minute, unable to move, until a familiar shiver shot up my spine, one that indicated that I was being watched. I swung my head around, looking behind me, down that hallway. Nobody was there. Nobody that I could see anyway. Feeling another shiver pass through me, I turned and jogged to catch up with the others. We found a set of stairs that, according to the sign next to them, led down to the restaurant deck from where we were on the main deck. Heading down a few flights, we found ourselves in yet another landing. Will suddenly let out a small laugh and pointed. "Hey guys, check it out." Across the landing from us was what looked like a small booth. Glass and metal bars separated the person who sat inside from everybody else outside. Looking up, I saw a sign hanging over the window. "Pursuer's office." That must be where any paperwork you need to travel aboard, along with any valuables that you want locked up in the ship's safe, Wyatt said. He let out a laugh. "You think there's anything valuable still in there? Jewelry, cash, shit like that?" I turned to him, feeling a bit astonished. "You're joking, right?" He shrugged. "Hey, we're all aboard here. I mean, if we took anything, I don't think anybody would know," he said, grinning slightly. "Yeah, until the ship gets brought back to dock, and the owners discover shit missing from their dumbass," Vinny said in a displeased tone. Now it was White's turn to give him an irritated look. "I was just kidding, jeez." He looked down at the floor. "Killjoys," he muttered. For my part, I gave him a long look, then looked over at the pursuer's office again. "I don't think it would be anyone on land that would be pissed off if we stole anything," I thought to myself. Before anyone else could say anything, the radio let out a quick squeak. My heart momentarily began to thud in my chest. For a moment, I was terrified that I'd hear that man's voice come from it again. Instead, the elated voice of Captain came. "Nate, we found the keys. They were hidden in the desk in the captain's cabin." I felt a feeling of relief wash over me, and I put the walkie-talkie from my belt and thumbed it as I saw relieved smiles cross the others' faces. That's terrific, Cap. You want us to head straight into the radio room? The man spoke again, a sharp burst of static masking his voice. Say that again. Now the man's voice came in loud and clear. Negative, Nathan. We might still need some supplies. We don't know how long it'll take for anyone to reach us, and we're gonna begin running low on food soon. Go check out the restaurants like you were planning, and then come to us. Wyatt's face fell at his words, but I saw the other two nod at me. Roger that, Cap. We'll try to be as quick as we can. Over and out. And with that, I clicked off. Come on, guys. This way, I said, pointing to a sign at the start of the left hallway. The four of us made our way down the hallway. We walked past the porthole that was still open, and as we passed it, the smell of ocean filtered in. I slowed to take a deep breath of it, letting it invigorate me a bit, and then I froze. I started thinking to myself that I didn't just see that. I did not just see that. But I knew I had. As we passed the porthole, I shot a glance out, hoping to catch a quick glimpse of the relatively calm waters, and I caught a split-second glimpse of someone walking past it. It had been too quick to see anything besides a blur, but it had been enough. I felt the fear of yesterday return. Oh shit, not again, man. I thought as my heart began to race in my chest, and I felt a lump form in my throat. Hey Nate, you alright? The voice snapped me back, and I looked up to see the others had turned to look back at me. All of them wore confusion on their faces. I thought I'd find my voice for a second, and then spoke, trying to sound calm. Yeah. Sorry about that, guys, I said. Will cocked his head at me, giving me an odd look, but didn't say anything. Refusing the urge to look out the porthole again, I started walking, pushing past them to begin leading the way. Come on, let's go. Let's get this over with. For a moment I heard nothing behind me, and then I heard the others follow. Holy frickin' shitballs, Wyatt breathed out. This... wow. We stood at the entrance to the restaurant next to a small sign that read, "Please wait here to be seated." For my part, I couldn't blame him for such a reaction. Even after what had just happened, I couldn't help but feel in awe of the expansive room in front of us. Like the rest of the ship, wooden paneling covered the walls. The only difference was that in here, squares and tiles of aquamarine had been indented into them. Some had ornate shapes, and across the room I saw a massive painting or stitching of what appeared to be a woman clad in ancient Greek or Roman clothes. Below her, 4 horsemen reared up as if to charge, while several men seemed to hold everything up in midair. Tables with expensive-looking tablecloths littered the room. The sea green upholstered chairs around them, almost inviting people to come and sit in them. Shooting a glance to my right, I saw a huge grand piano set against the far wall, and a huge aquamarine curtain covering what must have been a window to the stern deck. I don't even want to imagine what it would cost to eat here, said Vinny. Corzin never went to laugh softly. You're not joking, I replied, then pointed across the room at a metal swinging door. Look, there's the door to the kitchen. Winding our way through the sea of tables and chairs, we reached the door and stopped in front of it. I turned back to the others. Alright, cross your fingers that we'll find something in here, guys. Taking a deep breath, I put my hands to the metal door and pushed. We found ourselves in a huge industrial kitchen. Pots and pans of all kinds hung from hooks on the ceiling, and multiple stoves stretched away on the far wall. Fanning out, we began to search the room, opening cabinets and drawers. "Got what looks to be flour here?" Vinny called, holding up a large white bag. "Well, that's something at least." Continuing on, we pulled out more than a few ingredients, but nothing that we could immediately eat. It got worse when I opened a giant fridge and saw nothing but items like butter and milk inside. "Damn it!" Wyatt suddenly started yelling, slamming the fridge closed with a slam. He leaned back against the door, leaning his head back. Vinny softly spoke. "Look, man, if they were at port when the storm ripped her away, it stands to reason there might not have been much left in the restaurant. We still have the holds and the meat lockers to go through, but at least we found some things." Wyatt's eyes snapped open and he glared at the man. "Oh yeah? That's just like you, Vin. You've always got to try and cheer people up when you're not talking shit about things that have no merit." I realized the situation must have been eating heavily at him, and it was finally bursting out. Vinny narrowed his eyes and took a step towards him, clenching his fists. "Hey, fuck you, man. At least I'm not the dumbass who's thinking about robbing a ship when we should be searching it for food." The two of them began to shout at each other, their voices filling up the room and bouncing off the metal walls. I shot a glance at Will, who wore a hopeless expression on his face. Finally, it got to the point where I couldn't take it anymore. "Shut up! Both of ya!" I screamed at the top of my lungs, feeling my own anger flare up at their petty squabbling. I stood there, breathing in deeply as the two went dead silent, turning to look at me with slightly astonished looks on their faces. I'm not someone who yells often. Usually I'm quite quiet and calm. When I yell, people take notice. For a few moments there was nothing but silence in the kitchen as we all just stared at each other. Looks of shame and guilt over Wyatt and Vinny's faces. And then I saw them open their mouths to speak, likely to apologize. But whatever words they might have said died away the second a sound suddenly sprung up from behind us. Back through the metal doors, the sound of the piano beginning to play. This wasn't the sound that caused our faces to go pale though. What made the blood in my veins turn to ice and the gasp escape my lips? No, that was because along with the piano came the sounds of people talking and laughing softly. Occasionally the sound of cutlery or glasses being picked up and put down, punctuated in between. My breaths began to come in short, ragged gasps as I slowly turned to look at the swinging door. Vinny was the one who spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. "The fuck?" I turned back to look at him. His mouth hung wide, his lower lip trembling slightly, the sight frightening me more than the sounds emanating from back the way we came. Vinny isn't someone who speaks easily after all. Then again, this isn't exactly a normal level of creepy shit, is it? The sounds continued. I heard what sounded like a woman let out a particularly loud laugh, and then Wyatt spoke up. What do we do? He asked. The unspoken answer was one I'd been trying to avoid in my head. Aside from that door, there was no other way out of the kitchen. I forced myself to take a step towards the door. Nate, what the hell are you doing? Vinny hissed at me, but I ignored him, taking another step forward. With each step I took, feeling the terror that I had yesterday return. I could feel it rearing its ugly head to begin tearing apart my insides. I pictured dozens of shadowy figures waiting just on the other side of the door for us, waiting for us to step out so they could rush us. But it was either sit in that kitchen until the sound went away, if it did, or open the door and peek out. By the time I stood next to the door, my heart felt like I had just finished running a fire log, and the sweat was rolling down my face. I started thinking to myself, God, please don't let them be there. Don't let it happen again. Don't let me see them. Slowly I reached out with a trembling hand, watching as it made its way to rest on the metal, which felt shockingly cold to the touch. I turned and gave one last look at the others. They looked absolutely petrified. As I began to turn back, a new sound came, this one louder, almost ear-piercing. I ripped my hand away from the door, clapping both over my ears as they threatened to burst. It continued for a few moments, and the realization slammed into my brain what the source was. It was the fucking ship's horn. Then it ceased, dying away but leaving the sound echoing in my head. I slowly pulled my hands away, looking up to see everyone else doing the same. And that's when I realized that everything had gone dead silent. The sounds of the piano and the people no longer came from the other side of the door. It was as if they had never been there in the first place. Turning, I saw the others had realized it as well. Wyatt suddenly strode forward, pushing past me and slamming his shoulder into the door. It flew open, softly hitting the wall behind it with a thunk, revealing the empty restaurant, as empty as it had been when we had entered. For a moment he simply stood there as we gathered behind him looking out. Then he took 2 steps into the room. No, there's no fucking way, he softly muttered to himself. He swung around, an almost wild look in his eyes. I mean, you all heard it too, right? Slowly we all nodded. His eyes darted around as he looked at the floor. It's freaking impossible. We're alone in this ship. But there was freaking people out there. People talking and shit. There was a fucking piano playing. He suddenly swung around, raising his arms and screaming into the empty room. What the fuck is going on? The 3 of us slowly left the kitchen. Vinny went and stood beside Wyatt, trying to calm him. But I could see that the experience had, for lack of a better phrase, royally fucked up the man's brain. And that wasn't even half as fucking terrifying as what I saw yesterday. The thought made me snap my head up and look around the restaurant, half expecting to see the shadowy figures emerging from the corners, but nothing stirred. The radio in my hip squawked. "Nate, come in! Right now! Over!" I reached down, trying to steady myself. I took a deep breath and thumbed the walkie-talkie. "I'm here. What's up, cop?" The man's voice came in again. I noted with a pang of surprise that there was a trace of anger in it. "Wherever your team is, get the fuck up to the radio room, now!" I looked up from the radio, seeing that everyone had turned to look at me. I saw the same expressions of confusion and worry as I must have had on my face. I hit the button again. We're on our way. Sparing a last look around the restaurant, I motioned for the others to follow as I hurried up the hallway. "So you're telling me that none of you managed to get inside the radio room and rip off the microphone?" the captain demanded, his veins in his neck bulging out from barely disguised rage. Everyone stood in front of the radio room, which now hung wide open, the metal door swinging slightly, letting out soft creaks. I looked inside, seeing the ancient setup, sitting along the left wall of the room. My eyes ran over all the equipment stacked neatly on top of each other, finally coming to rest to the place where the microphone used for transmitting radio calls stood. I should say, where it should have stood. Instead, the space laid bare, and I saw that it hadn't been gently pulled out of the system either. Frayed and snapped wires hung from the jack still hooked onto the radio, showing someone had ripped it out with great force. I finally found my voice. None of us would ever do that, especially as we want to get off this shit. He shot a glare at us. He then shook the keys in his hands for emphasis. "So you expect me to believe that while we went hunting for these, that the room just happened to unlock itself and the microphone just happened to tear itself and walk away?" Then he spoke up. "Look, Cap, Nate's telling the truth. We were nowhere near here, and none of us would sabotage rescue like this." The man's eyes snapped up to look at him. I saw Spencer shoot an accusatory look at us. "Then where were you? Considering that the captain called you over 20 minutes ago and told you to meet us right away." A wave of confusion washed over me. "What the hell are you talking about, Spence?" I asked. He rolled his eyes at me. "Oh, come on, dude. Don't give me that fucking confused look bullshit. The captain radioed you and said we found the keys. And when you four asked him if we should meet up right away, he said yes. And then you all said that you guys were on your way and that you would meet us here." A mixture of shock and further confusion began to rise in me as I saw Wyatt and Vinny exchanging puzzled looks. "Nah, that ain't right," Wyatt finally said. "Nate asked that question, alright, but when the captain replied, he told us to keep going and search the restaurant for food and supplies." The captain turned an incredulous eye at Wyatt. "What restaurants? No one ever said anything about restaurants to me. I just said try to find some food and supplies." Everyone began arguing, but the sound was drifting away from my ears as my mind raced. He's right. He never said anything to me about restaurants before we split up. Just supplies. A shiver shot up my spine as another dot connected. And I never said anything about the restaurants when I replied to him. was the one who. The realization slammed into me like a truck, and I felt all the blood drain from my face as the simple but terrifying conclusion came to the surface. That wasn't the captain. I breathed out. Everyone stopped arguing to stare at me. What? Andrew asked, seeming confused. I slowly turned and looked at the three who had been with me, quietly repeating myself. That wasn't the captain who was talking to us. I saw the realization slam into Wyatt and Finney's face, saw their faces turn as pale as mine. Oh, fuck. No. Wyatt whispered, his eyes beginning to frantically dart around in his sockets. Somebody want to explain to me what the hell you're saying? The captain demanded, but I didn't answer. I stared at the shocked and frightened faces of my crewmates, at my two crewmates. I forced my voice to squeak out. Where's Will? Everyone went silent as they began to look around. Then they began to call his name, and then finally everyone began to run around, searching for our missing friend. Spencer dashed up the stairs to the bridge, returning later to confirm it was deserted. Panic began to well up inside me as we moved from the bridge back down to the promenade deck. The guy was here not even 5 minutes ago. How the hell did he slip away? Will! I heard the captain call as he led the way to the main lounge, which stood as empty as it had when we left. He turned around, a look of panic on his face. Where the hell did he go? He exclaimed, as he continued to run for the other end of the room. A thought slowly began to push forward in my mind. For the life of me, I still can't explain why it came to me, but the more it persisted, the more I became convinced that I was right. The veranda grill. The veranda grill! I shouted out. Everyone turned to look at me, realizing most of them didn't know what I meant. I stabbed towards the AFT section of the ship. The restaurant, the one that we went to. Wyatt and Finney's face changed as their minds clicked. Moments later, the three of us were racing down the hallway, the others struggling to keep up. We took the stairs down to the restaurant deck, two at a time. The marble steps threatened to fling our feet out from under us. Reaching the landing, we sprinted past the pursuer's office and down the hall. I didn't even spare a glance at the split open porthole. I didn't look at anything until we reached the entrance to the veranda grill, where I stopped in my tracks. What did you stop running for? The captain began, but his voice died away as he heard it as well. Everyone stood there, still and silent as a statue, just listening. There were voices coming from inside the restaurant, just out of sight around the corner. I felt my pulse quicken and my heart begin to pound. The first voice I instantly recognized as Will. The man's snorting laughter was unmistakable, but it was the second voice, a woman's voice, that for yet another time that day froze my blood in my veins. Like Will's voice, this voice spoke too softly for me to be able to make out any specific words, but it was loud enough that I was able to make out one specific detail. The woman spoke with a clear British accent. What the actual fuck? Andrew managed to spit out. I slowly turned around, looked at the captain. His face had turned as white as a sheet, and I saw his lower lip quiver slightly. Then it set, and he strode forwards. Captain, no. I whispered, reaching out to snag his arm, but he tore himself out of my grip and walked into the restaurant. Instantly, the voices stopped speaking and he simply stood there, staring at something out of sight. Then he gestured for us to come and join him. We all walked quickly to stand next to him. The restaurant was empty, looking exactly as it had when we left, with one exception. At a table near the piano, Will sat, his back to us. He didn't turn as we entered, simply continued to sit and stare at the wall. Everyone exchanged a look. Then the captain led us over to him. As we approached him, I suddenly became aware of a smell which hung in the restaurant, one which was impossible to miss: perfume. It grew stronger as we stepped next to him, and for a moment I was terrified that we'd see him dead, his mouth wrenched open in a silent, unending scream. Instead, to our surprise, a happy, content smile adorned his face. His eyes were glazed over, almost as if he were drunk or hypnotized. "Will?" the captain finally asked, his voice low and gentle. At his words, he swung his head to look at all of us. "Oh, hey guys," he said, his voice sounding almost like a character in a cartoon who had just been stuck with Cupid's arrow. Wyatt spoke up. "Dude, where'd you go? You scared the hell out of us." Will shrugged his shoulders. "Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. I just met the most wonderful woman." He let out a content sigh. "The woman of my dreams, for sure." A chill ran up my spine at his words. "What woman?" I managed out. He smiled. "Her name is Diana. She's an actress, a singer, so intelligent and interesting." He sighed again. "Oh, God, what a woman." Then he turned more towards us, exposing the other side of his face. If I hadn't felt so mentally fried, I might have gasped. There was a red lipstick mark on Will's right cheek, the kind that you get when a woman wearing it kisses you. It stood out clear as day. Even from this distance, I could see that it still looked, well, wet. Will's smile grew. "She likes me, you know," he declared, looking like the happiest man in the world. In this situation, it scared the ever-living shit out of me. "Okay, this is too fucking creepy," Spencer finally said, his voice trembling slightly as he looked around the restaurant. "You're not kidding," I said silently. The captain turned to us, worry now clearly etched on his face. "Does anyone know what the hell's going on?" he asked. It's time to come clean and tell him. Tell all of them the truth. I thought to myself as I started to force myself to speak. As much as I wish I didn't, I think I do. Everyone turned to me. I took a deep breath, and then I began to speak. I told them everything about it all, everything that happened, everything you guys had said, the things they denied about the horrifying things I saw in the darkened hallway yesterday, and about what the four of us experienced not even half an hour ago right in this very restaurant. As I spoke, I saw some of my crewmates' faces go pale, others seemed to fight what I was saying. I saw Spencer and Andrew. They didn't believe a word that I said, or at least didn't want to. But I saw that the captain did. When I finished, there was a long silence. The captain then spoke. I'm not entirely sure I believe all this. That this is the actual Queen Elizabeth that were aboard, and that it's actually a ghost ship, but this... He gestured towards Will's smiling, lipstick-covered face. This is all I needed to make up my mind. He looked over at me. We have over a week and a half's food and water left. We're gonna go gather up in the lower one of the lifeboats. We're gonna row the fuck away from the ship as fast as we can, and we're gonna pray we make it back to land. At his words, Will's face suddenly turned worry. No, I don't want to leave, he said. Not after meeting Diana. I want to stay. The captain grabbed Will by the arm and hoisted him to his feet. Frankly, son, I don't give a damn what you want. We're leaving now. The younger man began to protest and struggle, trying to wrench himself out of his grasp, but the captain was stronger and he pulled him towards the exit. He was almost shouting as we entered the hallway. Get the fuck off me! I don't want to fucking go back to that shitty fucked up world. That's 2023. I want to stay. She said I could stay. That my dream to stay forever in the 1950s could be real. I felt a chill at his words, but continued following the captain. We had just reached the bottom of the stairs when a huge vibration surged up through the floor into our feet. It was so strong that I nearly fell flat on my arse. I muttered, "What the hell was that?" At the same time, Vinny spoke the words aloud. "What the hell was that?" A new sound began to filter up from beneath our feet. A deep low pitch, a hum that slowly began to intensify. I suddenly saw the captain's face pale even further than it already was. "No," he breathed, then began tearing up the stairs, dragging Will behind him. As we followed, I suddenly realized why he'd been reacting that way. When I was a little child in the 90s, I travelled aboard a cruise ship with my aunt and uncle, and I clearly remembered the noise the giant engines made as they powered up before we left port. The engines are starting. Everyone raced for the nearest door to the outside deck. I prayed that I was wrong, that the ship would still be dead in the water. When we emerged outside, it wasn't. When we emerged on the deck into the fading light, it was to see that the ship had begun moving, accelerating far quicker than I thought such a huge ship ever could. The water at the stern stretched out behind us in a foam, churning up by the ship's huge propellers. As we stood on deck, I felt a sinking, hopeless feeling fall over me. We cannot escape in the lifeboats now. We would be sucked under, torn apart. Slowly, silently, Everyone turned away from the sight, unsure looks in their faces, except for Wills, who was wearing a grin and a static look. Currently, we're in our cabins. We've paired up, each having 3 or 4 people per room. Nobody wants to be alone now. The captain took Will into his room. He refused to let him out of his sight. The doors are firmly locked, though I doubt after what I've seen that they would do anything. If whatever this is truly wants in, then they'll find a way. And the fire axes that we have brought into this room with us won't do a damn bit of good. Somehow the others have fallen asleep. Spencer and Andrew on the giant bed, Wyatt on the floor with a blanket and a pillow. I think I'm the only one still awake. This ship doesn't want us to leave. Enough to fire up its own engines and take off, or where? I don't know. I'm terrified. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen to us. But I want to ask, what should we do now? What do you think we should do? Unfortunately, I don't know if any of you have any ideas that would actually be helpful in this situation. However, I have to ask. It's the only shred of hope I have left. So please, what should we do? How can we even attempt to stop this ship? How the fuck can we defend ourselves against things that are already dead? And what the hell is happening to Will? What did that woman he spoke of, Diana, what did she do to him? I was about to finish this message to you, but I have to tell you 2 final things. 2 things that scare me almost more than anything that's happened today. The first is that I hear music. Not music over the intercom, but actual live music filtering in through the door and the walls. It's an old song and one I recognize. A song my grandmother used to listen to constantly. A big band song called In the Mood by Glenn Miller. Worse is that I hear voices, I hear laughter, and occasionally I hear screaming. But that's not the part that scares me the most. What fills me with an existential dread. As I was sitting here typing, something was forced under the door. When I flicked on my flashlight with my shaking fingers and aimed it at the floor, I saw one of those programs, like the one I found yesterday. When I went over to it though, I saw it was different. A smiling cartoon octopus stared up at me from the cover. One that was playing a trumpet and a violin, its tentacles holding the same objects that had been on the other program. When I flipped it open with my shaking hands, I saw 2 things that made me want to scream. The first was the date in the upper right hand corner. It read Wednesday, December 6th, 2023. The second was what it was saying on the left hand side of the page under the notices bulletin. we would like to welcome on board our newest passengers, Gabriel Lerner, White, Strucksky, Vincent, Gaetano, William Jenkins, Andrew Weber, Spencer Michaels, and Nathan Rogers. We hope you enjoy your stay with us. My God. God help us. Oh, hello. Your friendly neighborhood Reaper here. How is everybody? That was part 3 to the incredibly amazing tale my crew and I are stuck aboard an abandoned ship. This one is titled It Won't Let Us Leave. Written by, as I hope you're well aware of by now, the amazing author G.L. Goodwin 1919. As always, you'll find a link directly to the story below in the description, along with the name of the creator, so you can check out any other work that they've done. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. It took me like 6 hours because I have to admit, I started this project with little to no direction, and I kind of regret that now, because I started off with an English accent, which has gone English, Irish, Scottish, every type of which way, and now I'm trying to find myself back in the right accents. I'm gonna do something different when I release them all as one, so you just need to wait for that if you're not too interested in this current one. But it will be a good long few hours once I've completed the final process. So hopefully that'll get everybody interested to coming along. If you're wondering what the click sound is, I'm playing with my inhaler. I don't know why, but hey, that's what happens when you're asthmatic. You're weird. Oh, it expired last year. There you go, you find something out every day. But anyway, outside of all of that, I do hope you enjoyed listening today, and that you are going to come back and listen to the next part next week. And yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun with this, so I do hope that you kind of just follow along, keep coming. Well, I guess I've dragged this out already too long. I mean, we've got, another 2 minutes before it hits the 60-minute mark, and there's no way you want to hear me ramble on for that long. So, as always, be safe wherever you are. Have an amazing night or day. And this is Grim. And I'm, well, signing off.